So let's see, how many is this now? I think this is the fourth one in the series, and the series is on using emergence as a therapy. And we are talking about it in kind of the sense that you would sit, if you were sitting with somebody and if you had studied emergence as a therapy for, a few years or so. How would you start a session with somebody who had never done this with you? If they say, what do you do in therapy? What kinds of things? Quite honestly, this is one of the more difficult things that people struggle with when they're relatively new to emergence. It could be 3 to 5 years is relatively new. I'm doing it, oh God, I don't remember how many decades it is now, but truthfully, somewhere around 5 or 6 years in, people begin to have the experience of when they sit with somebody and they hear how differently they speak and how they don't have to try to speak differently and so on. They relive that pleasant surprise about how they used to think the world worked differently. And certainly they used to think that people did things for reasons. Logic heals. Healing was a one and done. All manner of things. If symptoms came back, the wound never healed. The therapy hadn't worked. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to revisit one of the earliest drawings that I made about my discoveries. But I also would like to, before doing that, I'd like to talk about the event that I promised in the beginning of the first talk about, or the end, about how did this happen? I've told you that I make my discoveries by first drawing something that I experience in my body, an intuitive sense in a way, but making the intuition have a physical appearance, colored, shaped lines, balls, etc. All those things, In the previous drawings, in the spiral drawing, you see that I drew emergences as these little gold ovals with, gold to yellow changing, aha moments. I give those moments a physical existence, and then that physical existence is in my head, and it helps me to make more discoveries about what is the picture, the emergences, right? And so then I picture it as a ball on a circle versus then I picture it as a succession of increasingly smaller balls in a spiral circling in. And that physical existence gives you something to picture when you think about how healing happens. Then I gave you a picture of what happens when you heal. What's happening in those gold balls? What's changed inside you? And there's 3 different little pieces on a single drawing. In the upper left one, there's a unhealed. What is it like to be unable to picture something? No matter, even if you're asked, make it up, imagine it. And that's the evidence that you have a wound. Quite honestly, this is one of the main things we learn as emergence therapists, that the wound is what you can't picture is very important. And that means even if asked to make it up, even if asked to imagine it, if you can't, something's blocking your ability to make it up. And that block, that's why I use a wall in that picture, that you can see what's happening on one side of the wall, but it's way higher than you are, and you can't see what's happening on the other side. And what's on the other side is what you can't picture, and what you can't picture is what you cannot learn about, change, or see the good in. You make all manner of assumptions what's over there, but mostly human nature says, it's not good. I don't want to go over there. I don't know what it is, but it's not good. Okay. Then what happens the first time you heal? Well, the wall gets to be half as high. 50% of the wall gets torn down. That's what an emergence does. And quite honestly, although, in real life, if I walked over and it was half as high, I suppose I could look over the wall. But truthfully, when it comes to healing, we can't. we are still standing in the same position, and we look forward and we can see above the wall, which is a lot. We can see for miles, but we can't see what's behind that remaining half of the wall. And so on. The next emergence, whenever that is, in the succession of therapy, or often in your own life it happens because you're back in that situation, and then your curiosity, because half the wall is gone, you want to see what's behind that other half, and it motivates you to try to picture what's back there, or ask questions that you never asked before, or things like that, and then half of that wall gets torn down permanently. It's not there anymore, and it doesn't get rebuilt. And then half of a half of a half, and so on. So, where did this come from? I have mentioned repeatedly that I spent a period from about 1985 or 86, and then through about 1997, roughly, meditating every day. For a good portion of that time, I climbed a small mountain 15 minutes north of my home. And there were actually two. The first one, I was on the cliffs on that mountain for about 4 years, and then the 6+ years after that, I was on one a bit north of that one. But what about the story about how I come to discover that the beginning of all this, the beginning of emergence? Well, that's the thing that's going on in my life, that meditation. I have come a long ways. And by that I mean I had learned how to observe without interpreting. And if you think that's because it's a simple sentence, it's simple to do, no, it's not. And how do you know that you've learned to observe and not interpret? And I don't mean you never interpret, but I mean, how do you know that you even see it as it's happening? How do you make it something that's more or less automatic inside you, a part of your nature? Well, how you do that can come many ways. They all require that you have emergences about the two words and what they mean. But the proof that you have done it, the proof that you've learned it, is every time you think about that you used to interpret, you smile. And you feel love for yourself for the terrible burden you used to place on yourself about understanding something without actually seeing it. It's pretty tough. Anyway, my story. So it is August 1996. And in this period, and for decades before, the majority of my close friends were musicians. Sam's father, Dave, probably he's in that group, and he's been a friend of mine since childhood, and I love him dearly. I can't imagine the world not having him anymore. But in this group of people, who we all knew, all of us musicians, some we liked, some we had remote relationships with. If you could play an instrument or sing, you could have rough edges, but you were still a part of our community. And in this time, I have a friend, his name is Frank. Frank is a drummer. Again, I'm not giving you all the information, just enough. And Frank had gotten married, and something had happened to his wife, and his wife was in a coma in a hospital. Everybody thought that she was going to die. From what? It doesn't matter. She was in a coma. She'd been in a coma a long time. They never knew. They didn't know if she was going to wake up again, and she did. This is after quite a while. Can you imagine what it would have felt like if that was your wife or your sister or your daughter? Maybe it's happened to you, so you actually know what it's like. But in August, in 1996, I got an invitation to come to a celebration at Frank's family's house. I had never been to his family's house. I'd been to his apartment, but I'd never been to his family's house, and I followed the directions. It wasn't that far from where I live. I parked my car, and it was on a hill. A beautiful, beautiful August day. Beautiful. And as I got out of the car, I can picture where I parked. I parked on the wrong side of the street because it was closer to his house. Look at me laughing. Tells you I must have had an injury at one point in my life about doing that. But I can picture it. And as I walked around to the other side of my car, I stood there for a minute, orienting myself to where the house was. And I heard a voice in my head. Now this is part of why I don't talk about this. Because, therapists and psychiatrists and so on, people who hear voices in their heads, they're nuts. They need help. They don't allow for that. Anything could be a personal experience. And you're not hearing me say what it is because I'm not interpreting. All I'm going to do is tell you what I heard. As I was about to walk down and go into the backyard where I can know where the celebration is, I hear a voice say inside my head, not my thought voice, another voice, soft. The voice said, "You're going to meet someone." I heard my thought voice, but it's not really my thoughts. I heard a voice inside me that was having a conversation without my having any say in it. I heard this voice inside me say, "Will it hurt much?" And the first voice answered back, "Just a little." I met somebody in 10 minutes after I walked into that backyard. And as happens, we talked probably through most of the thing until nobody else we didn't even know anybody was there. We exchanged numbers, and I called her, I don't know, maybe a week later, and to have dinner, and we had dinner, and at that dinner, she said to me, "Look, I'm already seeing someone, not in a committed relationship, but I'm already with someone, and I'm only with one person like that at a time." In an uncharacteristically honest response, at least at that time in my life, I said, "Well, I don't want to just be a friend. That's now how I feel about you. But if that changes, please let me know." We had dinner. It was a good dinner. We got along well. And we left for the night. I didn't hear from her for a couple weeks. And then she called me, and she said something about getting together. And I said, maybe you'd like to have me show you where I sit meditation and so on. And now I assumed something. This was still happening at that point in my life. I assumed that this meant that she wasn't seeing that other person. We arrived at the bottom of that little mountain path, and I parked my car, and we got out, and we're, 200 feet up the mountain. And then I got the nerve up to ask if she was still seeing this person, and she said yes. Talk about ambivalence. I didn't want it to be, and I still wanted to be with her, and we climbed, and we spent much of the day on top of that mountain, and we had a really good time. Now fast forward another week, and I invite her, I give in, and I take her to the cliff for the first mountain that I'm on, to show her that one. And we get out of the car, and it's a beautiful summer day, and we're looking for where we're going to sit, because we're going to sit meditation, and we're standing about 10 or 12 feet apart. And she looks at me and she says, you know, my feelings for you are so much stronger than him. Me being me, I say, okay. Exactly as I'm saying it right now. Okay, I look at her and I say, okay. And then she says, no, I really do have strong feelings for you, stronger than him. And I say, again, okay. And I'm smiling and not going further, because she's not going further, but also because I'm not really wanting to find out. Is she really telling me I'll never be anything but a friend? Honestly, I don't want to know. Or I do want to know, but I'm, whatever, torn, stuck. So she tries a third time. Now remember, we're standing 10 or 12 feet apart, and she says, no, really, I really have much stronger feelings for you than him. And I look at her and I am much more intent now, and I say, it's all right. Look at my eyes. Something changes instantly. I don't understand. She yells, take me home. I'm stunned. I don't know. I ask, what's the matter? Take me home. I want to go home right now. Now, we're in our 40s. Or maybe I'm a little bit older, but it's not like we're children in high school or something. And I have no idea, but I also am not a person by this point who tries to fix anything. I try to observe. That's what I gained from that, from being in AA and from studying and practicing Buddhist meditation and from many sources, people I studied with. So we get in the car and we're driving and I'm asking her what it is, and she's very angry at me, and when we're near my house to where her car is, I ask if I can stop at the supermarket before we go home, and we pull into the parking lot, and then ensues probably one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had in my life. Because all we did for over 2 hours was, I would ask what I did, and she would say to me, I don't know, but I have worked on myself a lot, and I know you did something to me. She had to have worked a lot on herself because she didn't blame me. She just believed it was me. And I can see the difference. That was the cleanest argument I've ever had in my life. It didn't get resolved, and I dropped her off at her car and she left, and I didn't hear from her for a while. Some time past that, maybe a day or two, I had an aha. I put something together. You see, we had talked about a lot of stuff about our childhoods and our lives and things like that, and she told me her father was a very rage-filled alcoholic, that she had 2 younger brothers. Well, it couldn't have been good, but I remembered something that had not seemed important at the time. She told me about a time that her father took her into the basement with her 2 brothers. She said it had happened many times. He would take them in the basement to beat them. Somebody would say, why? And I'd say, you don't understand. There isn't a why. Is there an okay? Is there a reason, a logical reason? No. That day, he took them into the basement, and before he beat them, he said something. He said, look into my eyes. It took me a day or so to put that together and to realize what had happened. It's pretty obvious to anybody who has half a brain, that I said the words that her father said, and those words were what caused her to relive that injury. But I got more from it than that. I realized the state that she was in when she was moved from being so kind and reassuring to me to instantly being angry at me, that there was no time in between. It was instant. The change was like a startle. 1 minute you're fine, and an instant later, it's hell. And I saw, and I can picture it now as I'm telling you, that that's what happened that day. So I put together her story with what I had said that set it off, and I put that together with her change, sudden change in her demeanor, in her entire way of being, her actions, her attitude toward me. And having had studied with a number of people who did hypnosis and past life regression therapies and all, some things which you would say, well, that's nonsense and this and that. The learning isn't nonsense. Perhaps the interpretation may be, I don't know, I leave it alone. But I do know that hypnosis is real. It changes the state of mind. And I knew that the way that she was not in a normal state of mind. And I recognized each of the patterns from work I had done previously, and it just suddenly hit me. She was having that reaction to me because she was reliving a startling moment. And that what happened right before she got startled, what provoked the startle, was her father bringing them into the basement to beat them and saying, "Look into my eyes." I wrote a very long letter. No computer stuff, no internet that I could use, no emailing. I wrote her a long letter telling her what I had realized. And what did I write? I wrote everything I've just told you, but I realized that what's talked about in that gospel when the line says, "Forgive them for they know not what they do," is true. Why? Because I realized that what that woman had done to me, that pattern that she relived the startle, was what was happening to her father every time he beat them. That he was reliving a startle. And that every person who hurts another person is reliving a startle. And every person is innocent. All the way back. It does not mean it's okay what they do. It does not mean that I don't get angry, furious at times. But blame is assuming the person knew exactly what they were doing. Some people would say, but they do know. They say they know. What I am saying about know comes back to what I've been telling you. In order to truly know, you have to be able to picture. And I know that day that woman could not picture my face. How do I know? Because it's as soft as it is now. My voice, my eyes, my face. And that does not look like somebody who will hurt you. But you see, a startle shuts off your ability to picture. So once she heard the sounds of the words, she couldn't picture my face. I sent that long letter and I said what I said to you, all these things, including the innocence of human beings. I never heard back. So a couple years after that, one of my friends' mothers died, another musician friend, and she was friends with him as well, and I saw her walking into the funeral parlor. We said hello, and that was it. I heard some years after that she had gotten married and moved to Florida, and that's the last I've heard. I wish there was a way to thank her that she heard. But I also understand why she couldn't look at me without reliving that moment. I wish she could. I wish she understood what she had given me And I wish she understood that she had changed something in the whole world, including your lives. So, that was the start. And we will, in a future talk about the first time that I saw emergence. That is the first time I saw what wounds are, actually, that they're not symptoms. They're being startled, and that symptoms come from your inability to picture and learn in that area of life, the inability to have love or empathy or compassion, and of course when those things are missing, all that you feel, all that you think of is bad. You know? So now how do you get somebody, when you're doing therapy, to move out of that space? I tried telling her what I had seen, and I understand that she could not. She just thought I was being manipulative, that's all. It's understandable. So in this drawing, which is made in 1998, and we are moving from my story to this drawing, and this is 2 years after that event, roughly, you're seeing once again, it's a drawing. I'm not sure how many things you can see in this drawing that were the elements that would become constellated science, logical geometry, this way of making drawings that are a better way to do science. But there were things here. One of them is that what you see in the drawing has layers. Yet again, this drawing has 5 layers. I didn't know anything about those layers when I drew this, but for all I know, those colors, those layers, etc., were something on the path to me discovering that the mind, the personality, the mind itself that stores the personality is designed in layers, nested layers. And that's what this is showing, nested layers. But this is nested layers of what the person, what a person experiences when they have a wound. So now I'm going to set this up with one thing here, which is very simple. I'm going to read a succession of the 5 layers. I'm going to read those little paragraphs, 5 paragraphs. Yeah, and I'm going to stop at the end of each one and give you time to search your body, not your logical mind. Please try not to do that. Just try to sense your gut, try to sense the tension around your eyes and your facial muscles or your arms or legs. Try to see the sensations of it. What does it feel like physically to hear these words? Now I'm going to give you a hint that the progression of things starts from very little sensation. It's empty, in fact, to one where it may make you well up and feel empathy and compassion for this person in this little story. But we'll see. We'll see. So, on with the glasses for the old eyes. And here we go. So, the outside of this thing, at the top level, it says, I have always had issues with men who drink, but at least now I know I am a codependent. Feel anything? I don't feel a darn thing. It's empty. Oh, I know what those words mean. And that is the way therapists in my early time as a therapist talked. And it is a starting point of sorts, but it's empty. What the heck does that mean? I have always had issues with men who drink, but at least now I know I am a codependent. Okay, what the heck? Really? What do you get out of that? You have a nasty label for yourself now? I don't think that that's surprising at all. Alrighty, let's move in one layer. Even when I was a little girl, I always felt I was the one who had to protect everyone from my father's alcoholism. I feel something. I feel something. And like emergence therapists learn about the word empathy, I feel something because I feel an empathy for me feeling that. My mom, who was schizophrenic, I felt that I always had to protect everyone from her rage and anger. So I'm feeling something. Now, it's a big move from the first one. I have always had issues with men who drink, but at least now I know I am a codependent. By comparison, there's no comparison. Even when I was a little girl, I always felt I was the one who had to protect everyone from my father's alcoholism. Little less this time for me, but something. Moving on to the third one. When I was very small, I used to get scared a lot on Sundays, when Father would drink and get angry, and I would run to my room. Now, your ability to feel it is entirely based on your ability to picture this. Can you picture a little girl whose father suddenly gets angry because he's drunk, and the little girl runs away and hides in her room? It may have happened to you. Or someone you know. And it certainly will have happened to some of the people that you sit with in an effort to try and help them change their lives. I can see a scene at the Sunday dinner table where my father was drunk and he was beating my mother. Notice that the words say, I can see a scene. This is the path toward healing. The healing has begun. It's not aha yet, but it's begun. I can see a scene. And then I can see my father's eyes staring right through me, and I hear him saying, if you don't stop crying, I'll beat you too. Remember the thought bubbles drawing, the second talk, where I talked about where the next thought comes from? Does it make sense to you in this moment that that drawing that I just shared with you from 1998, that followed what happened between that woman and I in 1996, when I said, look into my eyes, and she screamed, take me home? I've tried to tell you that all the discoveries are developmental, that one discovery gets expanded on, expanded on, expanded on, that this is the way healing works, that the discovery that there's more there that you can picture that you had never noticed, that's happening in this little story. It goes from a very vague generalization to a very specific moment in which she was startled. And if you then look at all the things that came from that, the outer four things, so I want you to think about this in reverse. We're going to close in a minute, but this is important. I can see my father's eyes staring right through me, and I hear him saying, if you don't stop crying, I'll beat you too. Very specific. I can see a scene at the Sunday dinner table where my father was drunk and he was beating my mother. It's less about the girl, a little. When I was very small, I used to get scared a lot on Sundays when my father would drink and get angry and I would run to my room. Far less specific. Even when I was a little girl, I always felt I was the one who had to protect everyone from my father's alcoholism. Do you know how many clients think that's what you're supposed to talk about in therapy? The issues. What issues? I have always had issues with men who drink, but at least now I know I am a codependent. Emergence works inward, not outward. It moves from the general to the specific. But it also moves from the general, which cannot be pictured, the outer layers, literally, to the specific, the inner layers where things can be pictured, and toward more and more details, because it's the details that you discover in emergencies. And the smallest detail can often be the thing that provokes the greatest aha. The small detail. Like that small detail when I said that sentence, look into my eyes. And I caused such suffering in that woman. I hope this is beginning to sink in a way that you're gaining from it. This is so different from conventional views of therapy and healing and wounds and all that. Most of all, I know how much it is to take in. It's so much. And it doesn't come from memorizing. It can't. It has to come from my stories provoking stories in you, and the same process where you go from the general idea to some specific representative event in your own life. The time where you felt that you had to protect a parent from somebody. Only then does this really begin to make sense. All of it. What I'm saying in this talk, Emergence as a Therapy, and why you're even in this school. As always, I'm glad you're here.